Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. If you are new here, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. When I first proposed to Elena, I truly believed I was stepping into a forever bond. We had been dating for a year and a half, and although there were moments when her temper and spending habits concerned me, I convinced myself that love was about compromise and understanding. I wanted to build a future with her, and when she said yes to my proposal, I felt like the luckiest man alive. We set a wedding date 6 months ahead, and I began carefully budgeting. I had saved about $15,000, and I made it clear from the beginning that this money was primarily for the wedding venue, food, dress, music, and all the essentials. First, Elena seemed on board. She loved scrolling through bridal magazines, and we would sit together, making Pinterest boards of table decorations and flower arrangements. But as the days went by, I noticed her shopping bags piling up. It started innocently with makeup kits and new shoes. Then came spa packages, expensive dinners with her friends, and shopping trips that always ended with her carrying more luxury items than I could count. I told myself it was pre-wedding excitement, but deep down, a knot formed in my stomach. The breaking point came when I opened our joint credit card statement one evening. The bill screamed back at me. $8,600 spent in just a month. And not on wedding-related expenses, no venue deposits, no florists, no catering bookings. Instead, it was designer handbags, perfumes, and a brand new iPhone. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands trembling, my chest heavy. I kept asking myself, how could she think this was okay? When I confronted Elena, she brushed it off with a smirk. We're getting married. What's mine is yours. You're supposed to take care of me. Don't make a big deal out of it. Her words felt like a slap. I reminded her of our agreement that the money was for the wedding, that I wasn't some bottomless ATM, and that love couldn't thrive in financial irresponsibility. Her face darkened instantly. She crossed her arms and said, "If you loved me, you'd support me without questioning." That night, I slept on the couch. I needed space to think. I replayed our past months in my head, remembering every time she dismissed my concerns about money, every time she insisted I should spoil her, every time she said her friends' boyfriends spent way more on them. The truth I had been ignoring came crashing down. Elena didn't love me, she loved the lifestyle she thought I could provide. The next morning, I calmly told her I would not be paying for her spree. She erupted, screaming so loudly that neighbors probably heard. She accused me of being cheap, controlling, and even abusive with money. I tried to walk away, but that only enraged her more. Then came the words that changed everything. "You hit me. I'm calling the police." My blood ran cold. She was clutching her arm dramatically, tears streaming down her face like a performance, not reality. I froze for a moment, then instinct kicked in. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and started recording. "Elena, I never touched you," I said firmly. She yelled louder, pretending to flinch when I moved an inch. My heart pounded as she dialed the police. I kept recording, making sure every second of her charade was captured. When the officers arrived, she rushed toward them, sobbing, pointing at me. "He hit me. He hurt me." My stomach twisted in fear. I had heard too many stories of men being arrested on false accusations. But this time I had proof. I calmly handed my phone to one officer. "Please watch the video," I said, my voice shaking. I also explained that the apartment building had hallway security cameras that would show I never laid a hand on her. The officers stepped aside, watched my video, and radioed for access to the security footage. Elena's confidence began to falter. She kept shouting, "He did it. He did it." But her voice cracked under the weight of her lies. After what felt like the longest 30 minutes of my life, one officer approached me, handed back my phone, and said quietly, "You're free to go. Thank you for recording this." Then they turned to Elena. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for false reporting." The look on her face is burned into my memory, her mouth open in shock, her eyes darting around as if searching for a way out. She screamed my name, cursed me, and promised I would pay for this. But as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: relief. Relief that the truth had been seen. Relief that I wasn't powerless against her lies. When the door finally closed behind the officers, I sat on the couch, my hands shaking, tears blurring my vision. I wasn't crying for her, I was crying for myself. Crying because I had almost married someone capable of destroying me without a shred of guilt. Crying because the dream of my wedding had been crushed by greed and deceit. But most of all, crying because I knew this wasn't over. Elena wasn't the kind of woman to accept defeat quietly. Still, that night, I made a decision that would guide me through everything that came next. I would never let her lies go undocumented again. Every text, every call, every move, if she tried to play dirty, I would keep records. I realized that in a world where manipulation can destroy a person's life, truth becomes your only shield. I thought Elena's arrest would mark the end of our story, but in reality, it was just the opening act of a long, bitter war she and her family were determined to fight. After Elena's arrest, I thought she might take some time to reflect on her actions and realize the damage she had caused. I even convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, she would walk away quietly, and we could both rebuild our lives separately. But if there's one thing I should have learned by then, it was that Elena never walked away quietly. When the charges of false reporting were filed, her mother, Cassandra, swooped in like a storm, determined to tear my life apart. Cassandra was everything I had glimpsed in Elena, but amplified, entitled, manipulative, and driven by a relentless desire for control. The very next day after Elena's arrest, I started receiving phone calls from unknown numbers. At first, I ignored them, but then voicemails began to pile up. Cassandra's voice would hiss through the speaker. "You ruined my daughter's life, and I will ruin yours. You don't know who you're dealing with." I blocked one number, and 3 more appeared. It was relentless. The harassment escalated quickly. They launched a GoFundMe campaign with Elena's smiling picture, captioned, "Domestic violence survivor needs your help." The description painted me as a monster who had abused her for months and now abandoned her when she needed me most. They wrote about how I had controlled her finances, denied her freedom, and violently attacked her. Within days, the page had raised thousands of dollars from strangers who had no idea they were funding a lie. I couldn't believe it. My own name was plastered online as a villain, and I felt powerless watching donations pour in. I contacted the platform, provided evidence of the false claims, including the police report and video footage, and after weeks of back and forth, the campaign was shut down. But the damage was already done. My inbox was filled with hate mail from strangers calling me an abuser. Some even threatened me. My reputation was bleeding out in public, and it felt like Elena and Cassandra were standing over me, smiling. It didn't stop there. A month later, I was summoned to a meeting at my workplace. My manager looked uneasy as he handed me a letter. Cassandra had sent a detailed complaint to Human Resources, accusing me of being violent and dangerous. She wrote that I had a history of harassment and should not be trusted around female colleagues. Sitting in that office, listening to my boss read those lies, I felt rage boiling inside me. Thankfully, I had anticipated this. I pulled out the police reports, court documents, and the security footage disk I had stored for safekeeping. My manager took one look at the official stamps and signatures and sighed. "We'll handle this," he said. But I could tell it shook his confidence in me, even if just temporarily. Meanwhile, Cassandra and Elena were not done with the financial attacks. One day, I opened my bank statement and nearly dropped it. Unauthorized charges totaling over $2,000 stared back at me. Somehow, they had gotten hold of my card details and used them for online shopping. I called the bank, canceled the card, and filed a fraud report. When investigators traced the purchases, they discovered delivery addresses tied directly to Cassandra's house. That became another police report added to the growing file against them. Then came the most audacious move yet. Cassandra actually mailed me a printed invoice, yes, an official-looking invoice demanding $90,000 for emotional damages suffered by her daughter. I laughed bitterly at first, thinking it was some kind of sick joke. But the document was laid out with line items like, emotional trauma $25,000, loss of happiness $15,000, and stress and anxiety $20,000. At the bottom it was signed payable within 30 days. I didn't even bother responding. Instead, I handed it straight to my attorney, who added it to the growing pile of evidence showing their campaign of harassment. Court proceedings began, and every hearing was like walking into a battlefield. Elena would sit there, glaring at me, whispering angrily to her attorney, while Cassandra loomed behind her like a shadow. They tried every trick, claiming I had tampered with evidence, claiming the police were biased, even claiming I had hacked Elena's phone. But with each claim, the evidence spoke louder. My recordings, the building's security footage, the fraud reports, the bank statements, it all stacked up against them. The judge was patient, but I could tell he was growing tired of their theatrics. The verdict for Elena's first set of charges was clear. Guilty of false reporting and misdemeanor assault for the staged incident. The sentence wasn't heavy, but it was enough to sting. Community service hours, mandatory anger management classes, fines, and a restraining order preventing her from contacting me directly. I remember watching her face crumble as the judge read the terms. She wanted to scream, but instead, she bit her lip until it bled. I thought Cassandra might take this as a signal to stop, but instead she doubled down. She began harassing my family, calling my parents at odd hours, spreading rumors in their neighborhood that I was abusive and dangerous. My father, a retired teacher, was humiliated when neighbors began asking if the rumors were true. My mother cried on the phone, asking me why these women wouldn't leave us alone. I felt torn apart, knowing my family was being dragged into a nightmare they never asked for. One evening, Cassandra left a voicemail on my mother's phone saying, "Your son will never know peace. If the court won't punish him, I will." That was the moment I decided enough was enough. I reported the threats, handed over every voicemail, every call log, and pushed harder for action. Eventually, authorities began to see the pattern of harassment and intimidation not just against me, but my family, my workplace, and even my apartment management. Because yes, even my building's management wasn't spared. They received anonymous complaints accusing me of domestic disputes and violent outbursts. I was called into a meeting where they threatened eviction if the disturbances didn't stop. Once again, I pulled out my stack of reports and recordings. One staff member shook his head and said, "You're dealing with people who don't know when to stop." Through all this, I felt drained, like I was living inside a storm that never ended. Nights were sleepless, days were filled with paranoia, and every knock on the door made my chest tighten. Therapy became my lifeline. My therapist reminded me that documentation was my shield, that every time Elena and Cassandra lashed out, they dug themselves deeper into a hole. When the court finally acknowledged the breadth of harassment, Cassandra herself faced charges of fraud, harassment, and making false reports. Watching her stand before the judge, for once not in control, gave me a grim satisfaction. Her arrogance faltered as the judge listed her offenses. She was sentenced to probation, fines, and ordered to stay away from me and my family. The restraining order now covered her as well. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't the finale. Cassandra and Elena were women who thrived on vengeance. And as much as the court decisions gave me temporary relief, I braced myself for their next move. Because if there was one thing I had learned, it was this: when people like them feel cornered, they don't retreat, they strike harder. I thought I had seen the worst of Elena and Cassandra, that after the court's decisions and restraining orders, they would finally stop. But one quiet Friday evening, I returned home from work to find a note slipped under my apartment door. It was short, written in messy handwriting. "You're not done yet. Watch your car." My stomach sank. I ran to the parking lot and froze. My car, my once pristine sedan, had deep scratches down both sides, a shattered window, and spray paint scrawled across the hood. My mind immediately went to the people I knew who could pull such a stunt, but I didn't need to guess for long. Security cameras had already captured Elena with her cousin, Derek's cousin, Anthony. They were caught in the act, and when I handed the footage to the police, Anthony was arrested for violating probation, and Elena faced charges for conspiracy. It felt like a never-ending nightmare. Every time I thought the story was over, another chapter unfolded, dragging me back into chaos. I spent the following days filing police reports, coordinating with my attorney, and making sure all evidence was meticulously documented. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I refused to allow them to manipulate my life any longer. I realized at that point that victory wasn't just about the courts, it was about reclaiming my peace of mind. Even after their arrests, Elena wasn't finished. She targeted Derek, my new friend who had been helping me move past the trauma. She spun lies, claiming I had hurt her in ways that were entirely fabricated, trying to paint herself as the perpetual victim. But this time I was ready. I presented Derek with undeniable evidence. Police reports, court rulings, video footage, and proof of the harassment and vandalism. Derek's expression changed from skepticism to disbelief as he saw the full extent of their lies. Within days, he ended any association with her. She had no new audience, no sympathy, no leverage. Watching her plans crumble was oddly satisfying, but I also felt a deep weariness. This had gone far beyond a broken engagement. It had become a battle for my life, my safety, and my dignity. Elena's court appearances for the conspiracy charges were tense. She walked in with a forced air of confidence, but the moment the judge began reviewing the evidence, the footage of her vandalizing my car, her previous false reports, and the pattern of harassment, her facade cracked. She was found guilty of conspiracy to commit vandalism and violating the restraining order. Her sentence included jail time, probation, fines, and a mandatory psychological evaluation. Cassandra wasn't spared either. The court acknowledged her persistent harassment, fraudulent claims, and interference with my workplace and family. Her punishment included probation, fines, and she even lost her job. I remember watching her leave the courtroom, a mixture of rage and defeat on her face. She had tried to manipulate every angle of my life, but every move she made only dug the hole deeper. After the dust settled, I finally allowed myself to breathe. For the first time in months, I walked into my apartment without glancing nervously over my shoulder. I still carried the scars of the ordeal, emotional ones that therapy helped me navigate. But I was free. I reconnected with my family, who were finally able to relax, and I cautiously began seeing someone new, someone who respected my past and appreciated my journey. The sense of normalcy returned, slowly but surely. The biggest lesson from this chapter of my life was clear. Document everything, trust your instincts, and never allow manipulation to dictate your choices. Elena and Cassandra had spent months trying to control, humiliate, and destroy me. They had failed not because I was stronger physically, but because I was diligent, observant, and relentless in defending the truth. Their obsession with revenge ultimately led to their own downfall, and their false narratives crumbled under the weight of evidence. I also learned the importance of emotional detachment in these situations. I could no longer allow anger or the desire for immediate retaliation to cloud my judgment. Every action I took had to be calculated, documented, and lawful. It was this mindset that turned a potential lifelong disaster into a manageable, conquerable ordeal. Over time, I noticed how much more cautious I became about trust. But it wasn't fear, it was awareness. I now valued relationships that were transparent, honest, and reciprocal. The chaos with Elena and Cassandra taught me to spot red flags early, to question intentions, and to always maintain boundaries. In the end, these lessons fortified my emotional resilience and strengthened my capacity for healthy love. Elena and Cassandra's saga became a cautionary tale I often reflected on. They had attempted to manipulate, intimidate, and control, but every dishonest act they committed left a trace, and eventually, those traces became the chains that bound them in court and in public opinion. Their obsession with revenge blinded them to the reality that truth, persistence, and integrity would always prevail over deceit. Today, as I walk down the street with my new partner, feeling secure and genuinely happy, I can't help but reflect on the journey. The scars remain, yes, but they are reminders of how close I came to losing everything and how I fought back with resilience and wisdom. I've learned to let go of bitterness, but not to forget the lessons, the importance of vigilance, of standing firm in truth, and the undeniable power of documented evidence. If there's one thing I hope viewers take away from this story, it's that manipulative people can wreak havoc, but they cannot win if you are prepared, aware, and unwavering in defending yourself. Always protect yourself legally and emotionally. Always stand by documented truth. And never let anyone make you doubt your reality. So if you found this story compelling, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more real-life revenge stories, share it with your friends who need to hear this, and drop a comment with your thoughts or lessons learned. Remember, vigilance, awareness, and self-respect can protect you from even the most persistent manipulative individuals.
Moral lesson.
Life sometimes confronts us with people who try to manipulate, deceive, or control. Facing such challenges is exhausting, but it also teaches invaluable lessons about resilience, vigilance, and self-worth. Documenting actions, maintaining boundaries, and standing firm in truth are crucial. Pro